Dear listeners, this is the third part of this story. If you haven't seen the past part, we recommend you watch them first. My job was not at all burdensome. In the morning, I took my mistress to the bank's head office. At lunchtime, I followed her to the cafe. I waited for her to drink coffee and gossip with her friends, sitting at a nearby table and pretending to read a magazine. Then we'd go back to her office and I was practically free for the rest of the day. In the evening, I would picking her up and take her home. At first, I was looked at with interest friends of the hostess, but she seemed to quickly explain to them that I am no more than a piece of furniture, and the lady stopped paying attention to me. When I got home, the hostess had dinner and went to her room, and I sat in my room all evening watching TV and quietly played the guitar. Work was like heaven on earth. Taking advantage of my free time, I drove up to the university and probed about my reinstatement. It turned out that the dean of the Faculty of Mechanics was an old acquaintance of mine. At one time, we served together in the army. And later we crossed paths at work. The dean promised to help. After 2 days, he called me back and told me that I could be reinstated to the 5th year of the correspondence department. It was only necessary to pass the test for the subjects I had studied at the time, but was not graded. A colleague helped me again, and soon I received my credit and a correspondence student ticket. Everything seemed fine, but by the end of the first month, I was so bored that I was about to quit my job. In the morning, on the way to the office, I was about to open my mouth to give a monologue about my dismissal, as Inger touched my shoulder. "Eura, do you have a decent suit?" "Alas, no." Somehow, I didn't have to buy one. I had nowhere to go. In the rearview mirror, I saw how she raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Strange. Why you and your wife did not go to parties?" My ex-wife, I stressed the word ex, was doing fine without my participation. Moreover, in the last 6 months of our marriage she had someone to attend such events with. The hostess was quiet for a while as if she was deciding what to do next. "Let's go to the store and find you something. I have to get you some clothes." She was quiet for a while. The boutique princess was not far from the bank. As soon as we entered, a young saleswoman rushed over to us, almost running. "Hinger, I am glad to see you. Do you want something for yourself?" she sweetly chirped. "There are a few novelties. Next time, Lyra. I need to find something for a young man." Inger took me under the arm, demonstrating to the saleswoman our special relationship. Saleswoman Lyra comprehensively nodded. "There are some smart models. I'll bring them in a minute after a." Wild Lyra and her assistant brought several men's suits. "I would recommend this one." She handed me a black suit with a slight sheen. "The fitting room is this way. Vika, take me there." I do need to follow Vika in a small fitting room. When I put on a suit, there was a knock on the door. "Here's shoes, white shirt and tie." I took off my jacket over my shirt and tried on my shirt. The clothes fit me perfectly. I looked in the mirror. A middle-aged man was looking at me with signs of misery on his face. A sweet comfort for old women. That's it. I wonder if she'll buy me panties too. Hinger also approved of my choice. When Lyra voiced the price, I almost fainted, but Inger did not flinch. Ind differently handed her card, finished her free coffee, and smoothly swaying her hips went to the exit. I skied after her holding the bags in my hands. "A new boyfriend. Only old," said a woman's voice behind me. "No way. It's just right." With a hint of envy the other answered. I did not have time to hear the rest because of the loud slamming of the door. As we drove to the office, I wondered why I needed a suit. Probably going to a social event and dragging me along. When we got to the office, Inger asked me to come in. "Today, I'm invited to the opening of the art gallery. The entire royalty of the city will be there. You can't refuse. You'll be my date." We have to be there by 7 in the evening. My host has instructed me. In a business-like tone. Don't forget to change. She turned her attention to her laptop, and I realized that the audience was over. I helped Inger out of the car, gave the keys to the valet, and supporting the lady by the elbow headed for the entrance to the gallery. Inger was right. The entire city's Beaumont had gathered here today. Cavaliers and husbands had brought their beauties for a walk and were proudly showing them off to the secular public. Wives and lovers exhibited on their necks and risked jewelry worth many, many thousands of green. All this herd of chewing and drinking heads slowly paraded around the room, pretending to be interested in the multicolored masks hanging on the walls. Inga and I blended harmoniously into the landscape and began to drift leisurely in a large circle. Bring me some champagne. Inga was looking at the entrance without taking her eyes off it. I also turned my head. There was something to see. A colorful couple was entering the hall, and the woman was so-so to at, but her companion, a tall middle-aged man dressed in a fancy cream suit, almost my age. A tan face with piercing blue eyes. It was evident that the man painfully tolerates such an unsightly companion. Well, the companion was glittering with diamonds and dazzling white teeth reminiscent of an obsessive toothpaste commercial. Inger, not taking her eyes off the glittering couple, mechanically took the glass of champagne I had extended. For a moment, I saw that the playboy's eye stopped on her. He smiled broadly, and then he and his companion walked toward us. "Hello, my dear." Waltzingly stretching his vowels, he said, kissing Inger's hand securely. "Meet Irina, my friend." "Why?" Toothed friend smiled and slightly inclined her head. "Introduce me to." Her interlocutor, Inga, did not think it necessary. Yes. I was not particularly worried about this. I was interested in other characters. In the whirlpool of people, I saw Michelle on the arm with Mr. Ski. They were talking about something, stopping from time to time in front of paintings hanging on the walls. But it was immediately apparent that only Michelle was in this mess. Mr. Shamsky did not care about anything. Judges by his gloomy and bored face, he wanted to get away as quickly as possible. Yes. Michelle has no luck with interlocutors. She was still talking emotionally to her husband when she saw me. She even stopped talking. Her companion did not notice anything and silently stared somewhere in the wall. Michelle instantly saw Inger. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at her supposed rival. I even thought she was going to kill the unsuspecting Inger with her gaze. I was curious for a moment. If they were brought together one-on-one, who would win? I pretended not to notice my ex's eloquent gaze and stared indifferently at the opposite wall when Michelle's voice sounded just under my ear. "Hi, honey. Long time no see. What a wonderful dress, it so highlights your figure." "Hi, honey. Good to see you." Inger was not inferior to Michelle in her Pharisaism. The ladies kissed, barely touching each other's cheeks. "And you're here," indifferently muttered the former. "Can you imagine?" I almost never managed to get him to go to any of these events. Michelle nodded at me. "Even under the threat of death?" She laughed pretentiously. "Honey, you just didn't know how to use it." Inga's answer sounded more than ambiguous. "Well, I won't interrupt." Michelle picked up her treasure under her arm and dragged it toward the buffet. I had studied my ex-wife well for a quarter of a century and could see that she was shaking with rage. Inga continued her macho conversation. It was obvious to all that she was reproaching him about something. Her face was flushed with anger and at one point, she slapped him in the face. We were standing behind a pillar, so number one in the audience noticed. The playboy's face twisted in anger. He had already raised his hand to slap Inger back, but I managed to intercept him. "Calm down and leave." I gritted my teeth in a threatening tone. The man tried to pull his arm out of my grasp, but he wasn't very good at it. I took a step forward and closed my grip on Inger. You bastard. God, what a bastard you are. She spoke softly from behind me. We will meet again, dear. The man took his arm and grabbed the diamond companion who didn't understand anything, and rushed out the door. Tears welled up in Inger's eyes. Euro, bring me some cognac, she whispered. Wow. Do we not want to get drunk with grief? I did not ask what it was. It was none of my business. By the end of the evening, Inga was very drunk. I threw a fur coat on her and gently supported her by the hand and led her to the exit. Her heel broke on the stairs, and she literally fell into my arms. I carefully carried her to the car and put her in the back seat. On the way home, I thought we were being followed by an unknown car. The light in the hallway was on, and there were no people in the house. I leaned Inger's body against the wall and closed the front door. Then I carried her in my arms to the bedroom, which was on the second floor. There was a huge bed under a white canopy and a truffle case full of feminine knickknacks like elephants and kittens. The dim light and subtle scent of lavender. All this inspired madness. I helped her to the bathroom and then laid her gently on the bed and covered her with the covers. I didn't turn off the nightlight. As soon as I went to the door, I heard her voice. Do not go, stay. I sat down again on the wide bed. Inga turned to me. Hold me. She pressed herself against my shoulder. I shook my head, pushing the voluptuous thoughts away. Yes, it is not harmful to dream. After a few minutes in the sniffled, I carefully removed her hand and rolled over on his back. So I lay there half the night without undressing. When I was sure that my mistress was sound asleep, I carefully put out the nightlight and quietly left the bedroom. I didn't need any more adventures on my ass. In my room, I turned on the kettle and made coffee. Then I took my guitar and quietly played slow blues. It was Saturday morning. I went down to the kitchen and cook Aunt Mosier treated me to pancakes with honey. I was already eating the second portion when Valia, the maid, called me to the hostess. Inga was sick, swollen red eyes, hands hidden under a down scarf. Did you put me to bed? She asked, avoiding to look me in the eyes. Yes, I said, and giving my face a silly expression, I blinked faithfully as many times as I could. And undressed. Yes. But don't worry. I didn't steal anything. All the clothes are there. Inga choked on her tea. It was obvious that she was afraid to ask the next question. I decided to come to her rescue. You went to bed and chased me away. That is all. And nothing more. Nothing. What was supposed to happen? You fell asleep right away, and I left. I couldn't tell by the look in her eyes what was more, relief, or disappointment. I want to go to the hunting lodge today. It is 150 kilometers from the city, near Berezynska Forest. I'm ready. Only on the way we'll refuel. I left the canteen and went to get the car ready. As we were leaving, I saw the maid talking to someone on the phone. We drove up to the one-story pine log house when it got dark. The dust, the dampness, the smell of untreated pine boards used to upholster the walls, all of it hit my nose as I opened the heavy front door. I tried to turn on the lights, but the switch didn't work. I had to turn on the breaker in the basement first. Breathing on the back of my neck, Inga muttered, I come here quite rarely. And when I leave, I always turn off the electricity. I'm afraid of a short circuit. I noticed that it was much cooler in the house than outside. I'll go down to the basement and flip the switch. Inger took a dust-covered flashlight from a coat rack and opened the creaking door to the cellar and began to descend carefully, shining the faintly lit lantern under her feet. In the meantime, light the fireplace and look for something to drink. The light came on. Inger found and turned on the switch. I looked around. The room appeared to be a living room. There were 2 wicker armchairs by the fireplace. A little closer to the window was an oak table. Above the fireplace hung a large black and white photograph. On it stood a group of young men cuddled together. They were staring into the lens and laughing. In the very center of it stood a girl who looked a lot like Inger. Beside her, hugging her shoulders, stood a cheerful guy. The playboy I had seen at the gallery opening, only much younger. Inger in the picture reminded me of someone else I'd seen before. But of whom? I lit a fire in the fireplace of the small living room. Rummaging through the old cover, I found a full bottle of cognac and a couple of clean glasses. So are you getting the hang of it? Inga walked in so silently that I even flinched at her voice. I somehow quickly got used to the silence in the house and the idea that we were all alone in the neighborhood, and I already felt like a hunter lost in the woods. It was quite dark. From the kitchen window, we could see the tall pines and the shore of the frozen lake. I could see that the wind had risen over the lake. It was so quiet that one could hear the beating of the heart. Beautiful place, isn't it? Hinger silently crept up behind me again. Pour me a cognac. We went back into the living room. Is there a radio? I wanted something to relieve my sudden melancholy. Inger walked over to the radio on a small table and flicked the switch. From the speaker came the melody of a sentimental French hit of the 60s. I poured myself an Ingara drink and sat in the wicker armchair in front of the fireplace, glass in hand. I had no thoughts. I just wanted to sit and look at the fire in the company of a beautiful and, most importantly, not clingy woman. Inger sat opposite and was silent, also looking at the fire. The old music rushed back to my memory, and I unwittingly remembered a winter evening with Michelle on New Year's Eve. I even shook my head at her image. She was no longer the champion of my inner world. The logs in the fireplace burned through and disintegrated into smoldering embers. The wind picked up and shook the shutters and windows. The howling in the fireplace made me feel uneasy. I could see that Inger was shivering. Suddenly, I heard a thumping sound in the empty house. I froze. What was that? Was it the front door slamming? Had someone broken into the house? Dazed, Inga and I sat in chairs by the extinguished fireplace and listened to the darkness of the night. Outside the windows was a night in which a real storm was raging. I cautiously stood up, took the poker from the stand and crept to the door to the corridor. I jerked the door open. The key was in the lock on the front door. Damn it. I locked it myself. I jerked the knob. It was locked. There was another bang, like coming from the kitchen. I gingerly pulled the kitchen door open with the poker and peeked inside. It was empty. There were 2 more knocks. And then I saw that one window had opened in the onslaught of the wind and was banging against the frame. I lived to see it. Scared of the kind of trifles so often used in horror movies. I struggled to close the window, which was unwilling to yield to me because of the wind, and returned to the living room. As I held the poker in my hand, I suddenly remembered that I had a pistol in a holster under my arm. The thought made me feel completely ashamed. It was good that Inger did not see my face at that moment. If we don't add wood, the fireplace will soon go out. Binga shivered. I don't want to go anywhere in this weather. Maybe you could go get some firewood? It's stacked near the boat shed. The prospect of staying here overnight did not inspire me much. Even in the company of a beautiful woman, but there was nothing to do. I threw on my jacket and went outside. I walked cautiously down the icy steps made of wild stone to the boat shed. The boat shed was a sturdy structure with deer antlers on the gable. At the wall, under a canopy that was an extension of the roof, was neatly stacked firewood. I had already placed the second log on the bent left arm when I heard a rustling sound behind me. Dear listeners, please like and